Welcome to the Parenting Coach Podcast with Crystal. Over 7 years ago, I felt like I was stuck in this cycle of yelling and reactivity in my parenting that I did not want to be in, but I didn't know how to get out of. I knew how I wanted to parent pretty much exactly, and I'd spent hours reading books, but not finding a way to show up how I wanted to. That's when I started to turn inwards. My own inward journey was what my family needed. As I changed, everything around me changed. My kids' meltdowns decreased by 90% or more with no medications or therapy. I stopped yelling, sibling fighting became almost entirely non-existent, and I found that this change flowed into other areas of my life too. My intuition increased. I started to run my life and business in a very different way. If this sounds like something you want to, I can help. Join me each week as I share my journey, including the laughter, fun, hard times, and tears. Tune in for support, guidance, and fun conversations with my favorite experts, and really anything else that interests me too. Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Parenting Coach Podcast. Before we get started today, I'm going to tell you a little story. I love libraries. I take my kids to libraries all the time. As a homeschool mom, libraries are like pretty much the best thing ever, but they're the thing that I miss the most when I was traveling. I was in the library and I love going to the top read sections, and it's like, these are the books you should read. And immediately this book called Secure Relating popped out to me, and I was like, yep. I already knew immediately I was going to love it. And I did. And there were so many parts where I would like reread it or write it down or talk to my husband about it. And it feels like a surreal moment that I'm able to read a book and then have the cool author come to talk about the book today. So this is going to be a treat for me and for all of you as well. So welcome, Ann Kelley. And why don't you just introduce yourself a little bit, you and your book?
Well, thank you. Thank you for having us on. I'm really excited. I dove into your podcast and am now going to, have lots of referrals for it because it's just chock full of resources. It's amazing.
I love it.
So I have been a psychologist for, oh my God, more years than I can count now. And a couples therapist was primarily my stick. And in working with people, you start to, as you know, see predictable patterns that happen that create disconnection for themselves together and with their kids. And I really love attachment and have been a big fan. I think you had Dan Siegel on of interpersonal neurobiology, and have been doing a podcast now for 8 years. Before, you had to show somebody, here's the podcast, and this is what a podcast is. So yes. I do Podcast Therapist Uncensored, where we get to interview, we get to interview all these authors that I get interested in. And after years of doing that, Sue Marriott, my partner, and I decided that we wanted to write the book that we wish we had to hand to people. Because there's so many great books, believe me, out there. But with our specific interest being what's going on with attachment, how does it impact how we connect with one another? How does it impact how we parent? And how do we learn to stay in a moment to co-regulate together? And a lot of dialogues about attachment, I think, are insightful and helpful, but they're kind of categorical, and people like to define who they are. They like to put themselves in a box. And attachment was based on research. So people got put in a box. You were either preoccupied attachment or dismissing attachment. And then you understand yourself and how you work through those categories. But truth is, people don't function in a category, right? We're different with different people depending on what's activating our systems and what feels good and connecting and what feels threatening. And the more we know about that, the more we get to stay really present with each other, which of course, is the goal. So
I love the term co-dysregulation. I don't know if you coined that or something, but I read it and was like, oh my goodness, that is the perfect word. Because sometimes I'd be working with couples and that's all that would happen during the session. It would be like, wait a second, no. We're just going to and co-dysregulate back and forth. And anyways, I thought that term was just awesome because we talk a lot on the podcast here about co-regulation. My first question for you, this is less of a question, but more of a pattern that I've noticed in people just out in the world. They tend to feel like their childhood doesn't affect them, right? They get into the state where they're like, everything's fine and I'm fine. Or maybe not everything's fine, but definitely it's not connected to anything in my past. It's just now. And
Right.
I loved, my favorite part of your book was absolutely the real stories where you would dive into like, this is this person and this is how they got here, right? You were like, let's fast forward, rewind, I guess, rewind back to their childhood into how
Yeah.
they were interacted with their parents. And I think that we dismiss that even in good meaning, right? We're like, but my parents did my best. I love my parents. Like, that's great. And that can also be true, right? They did do their best and they did love, but it also can be dismissive of maybe some wounds that we can work through. So, um,
Absolutely.
yeah. So, what would you say on that? How do we help
Oh,
people see the connection there?
well, I think you made a good point. There's multiple directions why we would not think about our past. One is we might feel guilty because we had, parents that loved us and did so much for us, or they knew they were handicapped and so you feel guilty when you go back and think, oh, things that they did and messages they sent still impact me. You kind of have a sense of guilt. Or we have the opposite. Sometimes people feel like, don't blame your parents, don't blame the past, look at the moment, you
Hmm.
know.
Hmm.
And we kind of think of it as a yes and, right? We can't just blame everything on the past, but the past is what impact how our nervous system got developed, and it's not even, and your parents' nervous system was built on their parents and it goes down, and it just is generational. And it can be such an deeply relieving thing in some ways to go back and go, oh, this is why when I don't get a text, I get completely discombobulated
Hmm.
when I'm waiting to hear from somebody. It's not really that I just walk out in the world and am demanding and insecure, right?
Hmm.
Or this is why when I go to work, I just shut everything off and forget that my family exists and they should know I'm working hard for them and be fine with that. And when we go, oh, wait, these are patterns that really we learned to keep ourselves going and safe, it just has light bulbs go on and you can go, oh, you can have compassion for yourself,
Hmm.
compassion for your parents, compassion for your partner. And so I think we are scared to do that because we think we're supposed to be in the moment. But I think it's an enriching and probably one of the things you could do that could make the most significant difference in your life as a parent or as a partner or as a sibling or as a friend is to go, oh, wait, instead of dismissing that, why don't I take a peek and
Hmm.
look at it?
Yeah, look at what's really coming up. And like,
Yeah.
I don't always do that. Sometimes I'm just like, no, just going to be reactive. That's fine. I'll flip out later.
Yeah, for
But
sure.
um, in the moments when I do, there's always a deeper message underneath. Like when I'm
So
like,
much.
wait, what's really bothering me now? It's always something so much deeper than just like, frustrating text or like that my husband forgot to put the dinner on or whatever. Like there's always something more. And taking that moment to like really listen. I often think about it like kind of like inner child work, right? It's like listening to the child, just like I would if
Mm-hmm.
my little child was coming up and was like, hey, I have something to say. I know absolutely if I ignore that, if I push it away, if I go do
Yeah.
something else, they just get louder and louder until
Mm-hmm.
I'm like, let me pause, see what they have to say. And I think that's the process that's happening inside
Oh,
us.
yeah.
So,
Well, and I think too, if we don't do it, the truth is it's going to affect you. This is what I love to
mhm,
think about. Like you can decide to look back at your history or not. It's your choice. But it's not your choice that the history is going to impact you. It's
mm,
not your choice that it is going to enter in how you dialogue with your child or your spouse. It is going to happen. And so you could either do it blindly or you could open up and really go, oh, and then you have so much empowerment instead of it's not blaming anybody and it's not excusing yourself. It's actually, we like to call it in the book, it's like this courageous journey. It's like, it's a call to action. It's not a, poor baby, you had a hard childhood. It's, dang, that really impacted the way you perceive things. And, like as a parent, if we don't know why we're activated, then we just keep acting it out with our kids.
mhm,
And they're the ones that struggle and have, and when we go, oh, you just, you're going for the school play and you're scared to death. And let me talk to you. And that's great. But if I don't know that my own history of fear of social rejection is totally generating
mhm,
every moment in this okay, now what we got to do is we got to, if I don't know that's generating my own anxiety, it's going to act out and it's going to come out to our kids,
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. I see it all the time. And it's
Yes.
interesting because year after year it like still happens. And I'm like, it's gonna not happen one day, right? But I remember trying to decide what I was gonna do for homeschooling this year. And we've homeschooled forever, but we kind of go back and forth and do alternative education or whatever. World schooling. We've done a lot of different things. And at the beginning of this year, I remember thinking, they have to go to school this year. They have to get a tutor this year. Like I felt so much pressure around it. And a friend of mine kind of just said like, well, you've had such, beautiful years homeschooling. Why do you feel all of this pressure? And I paused and was like, wait a second, I should have asked myself that question. Why have I not dug into it? And as soon as I did, it was all this pressure of like, I actually can't do all the things, like me feeling like I couldn't work and I couldn't homeschool and I couldn't do a good job and my kids weren't going to learn what they needed to. And what would that mean about me if I took them out of the public school system and then I failed my children? And as soon as I started disassembling it, it was like just one day and I felt better because I was like, oh, there's actually all of this pressure on myself. And as soon as I released it, I actually decided to do the same thing. Like I made the same choice that I was going to make before, but I felt way better about it because there was no pressure. So like I said, I don't always pause and notice and dig in and figure it out.
Right. Nobody ever does. Right. And sometimes we have to do it retrospectively. Like, why was that so important? Why did I get so anxious? And I love your example because just when you slow down for a moment to go, wait a minute, what's that about? And what I love that you did is you went internal, right? And you went, okay, what's going on inside me? What's happening inside the building? Right. And when you do that, the grounding, even though you made the same decision, and my guess is you'll be so much more settled with that decision than if you had made it just with your eyes closed or not attending, because that anxiety is in your body and you can either attend to it or squish it down. And I love that example.
And I felt like there was so much force energy, like it was like me forcing. And as soon as I released it, what happened was I actually went to my kids and I just said, I was just feeling some pressure about that. I'm feeling much better. Like, what do you want to do? And I waited and I listened to them. And because they felt like it was their choice, they did end up choosing what I had wanted to choose from them in the beginning, but not because I made them. And they felt really empowered. Like each of them decided what they were going to do this year. And they all felt really empowered in the decision that they made. And so I think that is also a beautiful thing that we can give our kids is that when it's not me in control and force mode, then I can allow them to decide and I allow that growth that happens with them. So it was really beautiful. I don't always respond that way, but it occasionally I can get there and learn from it. In your book, you talk a lot about attachment and, how that came from my childhood and whatnot, which is what we've been talking about now. But I think that sometimes we think that whatever we came from childhood with now that we're stuck with, that it's like, if this is my attachment pattern and kind of way of being, then like, now I'll always be this way.
Right.
Can you speak to that?
Yeah. That I think is when I was talking about the categorical, I think we have this belief that we're going to get trapped in like, you get what you get and you don't throw a fit. It's like, this is the way my attachment is. I, for whatever reason, have preoccupied attachment or dismissing attachment. And the truth is, the more we engage our body, our attachment is based on our nervous system development and what we've learned to help us feel connected to other people and to feel safe, right? And so the reality is the more we engage with one another in a way that is safe and connecting, then our nervous system starts responding to that very same environment and we grow and we develop. And the truth is, research has shown that our nervous system never stops growing. It's not actually true. Our childhood childhood does set a stage for where we are, but it is not the entire script on any level. And
it doesn't ever, like not even when your, brain is developed or whatever, like they say happens in mid-20s, it's still going, hey?
Oh, you've got neuroplasticity happening your entire life. And it's true as you get older, we have the idea that we learned if you don't use it, you lose it. Very true. And if you're in a relationship and you don't keep growing, I mean, my other thing is there's only two directions. If you're not growing, you're dying. Right. Yeah. So this idea that we can continue to grow in our everyday relationships, and we don't always have to only be thinking about our past, right? We can learn a lot about our past by knowing how we're engaging in the present, right? Like if you find yourself, I used the example about the texting earlier, but if you find yourself, your partner, your child gets really emotional and you find yourself just distancing and separating from them, that isn't your personality. Like people just describe things, this is who I am.
Mm-hmm.
And it's not true. It's who we learn to be. And so I always love to like, who do you want to be? How do you want to show up? And keeping your eye on that in the present tense allows you to impact your nervous system in every small ways of how we relate to one another, right? Like your example with your kids is perfect. If you were to respond, not slow down, and then had that exact same conversation, but they picked up your sense of urgency because through neuroplasticity, we pick up, our bodies, whether you like it or not,
Yeah,
everyone
your kids
around
are
you,
feeling it.
everyone around you feels you before you know it. You don't even know that but you are communicating, even if you think you're flat faced and not expressing any emotion.
Mm-hmm.
We pick up all those subtleties. And so if you wouldn't have done that with your children, they might have picked up your anxiety, your worry, your needs to make the right decision.
Mm-hmm.
And if their bodies pick that up, then they may be responding to you out of your fear.
Absolutely. And I could feel it happening. I could feel
Yeah.
it happening. And in your we think of these as personality traits. I used to describe myself. If somebody like asked about me, I'd be like, oh, I'm really impatient. I just wish I wasn't such
Oh,
an
interesting.
impatient person. And like in your, the heat map thing, I don't remember what it's called. I definitely run red. So
Okay. Yes.
I'm a red runner, and I'd be hot. I definitely am more of the explosive personality type. And so I thought that was just a part of me. I was like, this is who I am. I'm just like my dad. He was always like this. And now I'm like this too. And I'll forever be like this. And when I started doing this work, one of the beautiful things is I wasn't trying to stop yelling. I wasn't trying to be less reactive. I was trying to relate to my kids differently. I was trying to figure out what was happening in my world inside. And as I did that work, I noticed over time that I stopped being reactive, that I stopped yelling. I haven't yelled in years. And I don't have to think about how do I stop, and not yell at my kids. I just don't feel as reactive because like you said, it's not a personality trait. It wasn't something that was just stuck forever. And I mean, I didn't find this work till I was like in my mid 30s. So it's not like my brain was probably already like my prefrontal cortex or whatever is probably already developed. So I love that neuroplasticity means that our nervous systems are also always growing and changing.
They really are. And not deciding, well, I'm just an irritable person or I'm just impatient. You didn't say irritable, impatient, right? Just like, I'm just impatient. If you just think, and so many people in relationships, as a couple of therapists, they want their partner to just understand this is who I am, as if like we're just supposed to accept that. I'm just impatient. So deal with it rather than, and you going, one of the things that you said that I wanted to just tag on to is it wasn't like, oh, I want to quit being impatient. And then we get very individual focused. I think in psychology, we pull for that as clinicians. Let's look at you. And I am saying, let's look at ourselves. But the truth is, we're very much about connection. Our entire attachment system is based on our need to connect and our desire to connect, every one of us. And when we remind ourselves of that, that is one way to help us ground ourselves. So when you're like, oh, when I'm impatient, I'm actually creating anxiety in everyone around me. And I've noticed I'm disconnecting. But with your kids, you didn't go, oh, I want to become more patient. You said, I want to connect with my child more. I want to slow down. And it was that desire for connection that allowed you to kind of more thoughtfully look at your own system. And that's when you brought up the co-dysregulation before. Like we so quickly co-dysregulate each other. And then we go, I mean, how many times have you had a fight with your husband or wife? And it's like, you're in a fight and you're trying to play the who started the dysregulation journey. You know what I mean? You started, no, I didn't get mad until you did this. Right. And the funny thing is you really can't most of the time pin that down. because it could be that your partner said something, but it was because your eyes were glaring. I mean, and we don't even have to do that ball. We just have to go, oh, wait, what do I want in this moment? And if you run hot, you run on the red side, it means you want relationships and you highly value them. And so when they pull away, they make you anxious and you want to move faster.
Yeah, my husband's blue. He's like, he's like the opposite.
So for your listeners, blue, we've coined colors out there because we don't think that any of this should be shaming, right? If you say, oh, your husband's dismissing and you're preoccupied, which is what the names of those categories are in most of the language, like who wants to be called preoccupied or dismissing? Right. Like, I think you're being a little dismissing, husband. Like, sign me up for him really listening to you there. Right.
Yeah.
But we give it color so you have visualizations. Red means that your system's activating towards the relationship, whether it's because you're afraid to lose it or you're angry and you're trying to get them to listen. But it's positive in the sense that it's very relationally oriented, but it could lead to pressure. It could lead to a lot of anxiety. It can send messages. And if your husband runs blue, means we use blue because it means your nervous system cools off, can become cold if it's too highly activated, if it's too much threat. And so that means there's strategies to cool off the emotions or to distance or withdraw or to get angry in order to stop somebody else from being emotional. And it's non-shaming, but we push each other out on the spectrum if we're not paying attention. And to go, oh, wait, when I start to get really hot and really impatient, it's not a coincidence if your husband takes off and goes outside for a little while. And then you could sit there and feel rejected for that. And so they go back and forth. And we like to really focus on the moments of connection. In this one moment, how do I engage my nervous system in the most connecting way? So if you're running hot, you're like, how do I cool myself off? Or if your husband's kind of cool, meaning he's kind of deactivated, here are some strategies for just warming you up, because just a quarter of an inch either way, you're going to feel more connection with one another, which is really what it's about.
It's almost like this ball, we're just tossing it back and forth invisibly and not seeing it. And so for me, I feel like it's bringing awareness to the moment. It's bringing that presence of oh, this is what's happening right now. This is where we're at in this co-dysregulation model. And all I have to do is do that. Even just to notice that that's what's happening, my system just relaxes. And then I get to drop the ball because I'm wait, I don't have to keep pushing it back and forth. I'm just feeling dysregulated. And then I can attune to myself. I like to think of co-regulation as something that I do with my own little inner child also, right? Okay,
for sure.
You're acting up, you're saying something to me. Let's just tune in. Let's listen. Let's comfort. Let's bring some mindfulness and presence to. And as soon as I do that, I can feel so much more relaxed and come back in a way that's not co-dysregulating for them also.
And that also brings you insight, because if you're regulating yourself, if you recognize your husband as more deactivating or blue in that moment, it's so much easier to not interpret him as being uncaring, but to think of him as overstimulated, even though he might not see himself as that way, right? And it's a less shaming way to see one another. If you're wait, let me calm myself down, and inevitably he's going to come closer to me. Somehow, I think of when we're really activated, the red likes to shake the turtle, come out. And it doesn't really work, right? But I think really, though, a lot of times people that run in the blue, the more deactivating strategies, when again, that's like Derek in our book, you really learn that. It's a healthy way to learn to adapt when you're younger. But withdrawing or distancing in your current relationship has an impact. And often when people run blue, they don't realize that they're part of the dysregulation, right? Yeah. They often get misconstrued. Let me put it more accurately. They often construe themselves as all regulated because they're not showing a lot of emotions.
Yes.
Right. So I'm the regulator. You're the one angry. I'm not angry. Right. And so that's one reason I was very motivated to write the book, is I love people who are in the blue, all of a sudden getting that insight that they're actually a lot more activated than they think. and that their withdrawal is very impactful, or they're quiet, or they're shut down when they in like, oh wait, I am part of this nervous system dysregulation, even though I'm the calm one. And I think that is so helpful. It depathologizes us together.
I've had so many dads come in that are like, I'm super regulated. I don't ever feel any emotion. That's like their next sentence. Like, I don't feel the ups or the downs. So I'm good. I'm like, that's not really what emotional regulation is.
That's not regulation. Because you can't, if you're one out there that says, I'm always regulated because I never get hot, or that isn't true. Your nervous system is responding. You know, there's we talk about it in the book, but there's a really amazing study done. I mean, lots of studies done on the kids who were initially looked at when they were younger as being securely attached. And that is because in this example, the parent leaves and the child doesn't protest. It doesn't cry. It just keeps playing. And then the parent comes back and the child doesn't seem to need a lot. They're very self-sufficient. They're very independent.
Yes.
Good workers, right? They're going to be the top in Adele executive because they can do that and not look up, and they're okay. But the most interesting part of that is when they got enough technology that they could actually assess their heart rate variability and notice the internal signs of distress. They were the ones the most activated. Isn't that interesting?
That's fascinating.
But they had learned to disconnect from that experience. So those dads out there saying, I don't feel anything. Well, that's because they learned to disconnect that, and you miss out on so much, when that happens.
I feel like so many moms are going to be listening to this and be like, that's my husband. Or maybe you're the husband, you're like, that's my wife. How do you help them, or how do they help themselves? Maybe people are listening and feeling like you're describing them. How do they help themselves to connect to that again?
Oh, and I love that the question is, how do you help them connect? It's not just fine. We have a chapter called Warming Up Blue Activation, and it's a warming up of self. And to remember that if that is you, it's not because you don't have needs for connection, because you have just as many needs, right? That's one reason actually they suggest that heart attacks and things like that are more prevalent for individuals that get disconnected from their emotions, is that their body feels distress and they don't know it, they ignore it. So the how-tos would be to know that you need it, even though your nervous system isn't telling you. And one of the things I like to encourage is, like, before you come into the house, right? Take a moment to get connected to yourself, and then to visualize. The thing is, when you're really, really blue, when you actually experience loss, it's highly activating. When you let it in, it's overwhelming, right? The people that run blue, the reason they come into therapy is often a significant loss or the threat of a relationship ending. It wakes your nervous system up to going, oh, wait, I do care. And I would suggest you do that way before you get there. Like, visualize what would happen if I came home and my wife wasn't there anymore, or my kids. Like, activate that part of your attachment system that needs to be stirred, and then let yourself feel it. And then you can find your value and let people know. Don't assume that people, just because you're working really hard and doing all the right things, don't assume that your people know you love them or that they feel connected to you. So when you're at the dinner table, your voice really does matter, and your attempt to connect matters. So slow down and go, ask yourself, have I reached out to feel connected to my wife or my husband or my child today? And it really can make a difference. We had a guest come on that was lovely, and she runs really in the blue. And she did that exercise where she was sitting outside and she was about to walk in, and she had an adolescent at the time. And she slowed herself down and she got connected to herself, and she decided to walk in, really address her daughter with a smile. And she's really just kind of shut down and in her own space and just expected. And then their engagement was kind of irritable a lot. And she walked in and expressed delight to see her daughter. She thought to express delight, but she had to take a moment to do that. She has a lot of delight for her daughter, but she doesn't feel it in the moment of interaction. She said when she walked in, she expressed delight. She saw a sense of surprise, and her daughter elevated right away, and she kept doing it, and she could not believe the difference. And you know what's so beautiful about that? It affected her daughter, but then she got a shot of oxytocin. She got the neurochemical reward that she wasn't feeling before. She didn't know she was missing it. And then all of a sudden she got that neurochemical splash of connection, and she got connected to it to herself. So the more we feel it, the more we open to it.
That's a beautiful exercise. I was just chatting with my son. My oldest son is in his first year of college, and we were just chatting yesterday. We talk pretty often, and he's like, I've been feeling stuck the last couple of weeks, just really down, really low, like for sure more in the blue. And we do a lot of intuitive journaling. And so he had done that, kind of just writing down, what do I think is happening or whatever. And he said, the thought that came to me was like, I'm disconnected from my heart. And I was like, wow, for one, like how beautiful and wise for an 18-year-old to like recognize that that's what it is. And he was like, I think I need to take some time just to reconnect that. So I'm going to call and give him this exercise, because I thought, what can I help him, do to kind of connect that piece again? Because I think it's so easy for us to get disconnected. I think probably more so as males, because we're, telling them to be strong and to not show emotion and to, I read my kids all of these books from the 1800s and 1900s, and I'm constantly pausing to be like, okay, so girls don't always just faint when they feel feelings. And also it is okay for boys to cry. And anyways, there's just so much socialization around males and emotions.
And so that's exactly why sometimes it's really important to go back. It's not always your parents, your parents have been socialized too. And every movie you watch, right? So our attachment system continues to grow throughout our lives. So what messages did we receive about how boys experience emotions and vulnerability, and how do girls? And that actually continues. Peers are actually a huge part of our development, so underrecognized. And that really comes out when you stop to look at your history. When you look at, why am I responding this way? You might find yourself not thinking about your parents. You may be thinking about your peers. And that every bit as much can impact how your nervous system grows and develops, because that impacts our attachment system. If you thought you would get completely ostracized for being emotional or for crying, then you start to feel emotional. Your whole nervous system panics. And you don't consciously know that, because you've learned to shut it down. And so socialization disconnects us so much from one another. And as we kind of go, like, we get to write a new script. Boys actually cry just as much as girls when given the room. And thankfully, but I love that example. I need to get connected.
He just said, I need to cry. I think I need to spend some time crying more. He said, I tried listening to sad music. He said, I listened to that really sad song you always cry at when you listen to it. He said, I wasn't able to cry yet, but send me some more sad stuff.
Oh my gosh, music is amazing. Music is another example we use. Yeah, set yourself a playlist.
Yeah. So anyways, I love that he was able to just like intuitively get there without me being like, this is what I think is happening. And how many of us feel that way, right? Feel disconnected from our heart, feel disconnected from ourselves.
Yeah,
so I love that exercise of like, and that it was so beautiful in your example too, for her and for her daughter, right? That it's like the opposite of the co-dysregulation, right? It's like we get to feed off of this beautiful energy.
Yeah, because we always think of regulation. When you think of the word emotional regulation, it almost we visualize somebody really hot calming down. But emotional regulation is not just about cooling down the hot. It's warming up. It's that's why our book is really focused on connection. It's like you being shut down and way down there in the thing. You're not connected, right? I would rather have somebody, like in couples when they're fighting and somebody's upset. It's like you should be happy they're fighting, because they're fighting for you. If they quit, that's a worst case scenario. That's somebody saying, I want connection and I want it with you. right? And that
Mm-hmm.
happens with our kids. They want connection. So they find these ways to do it. And when we start reframing it as a connection, we quit pathologizing the behavior, and then we can actually engage with it in a whole different capacity.
Well, it's never about the behavior. I was just on a walk with my mother-in-law yesterday and she was complaining about some stuff. And I was like, it's not ever the behavior. It's
so
always
true.
something underneath. And she like stopped walking and was like, wait, say that again. I was like, it really is so true. We focus so much on what's happening externally, especially in parenting, right? How can I get them to change this? How can I get them to sleep better? How can I get my teens not to talk back? How can I get them to listen to me more? But it's never the external thing.
It really isn't.
I feel like your book is a perfect way to understand that concept, that it really is so much more about what's happening in the internal world and attuning to that and helping ourselves through that. And I love what you said here too, that the nervous system is always changing. So if you're feeling like, shoot, I've messed up my kids' nervous systems and also my own, and it's over, that it's never true. There's always change. And I think even if you're an adult with adult children, I was
just going to say that. Yeah, it's never too late, right? It's like David Elliott's book. He's a great gentleman that talks about attachment. It says it's never too late to have a good childhood, right? Like, in other words, you can revisit these things in a relationship at any time. But when we do it without panic and without anxiety, and we do it with connection, wow, it's really, really powerful, right? Especially for those of us that maybe kind of can run red. Like, in other words, like maybe a little too hot, too activated. And the job isn't to say, calm down. Just stop doing that. If you would just regulate yourself, right?
Yeah. When has that ever worked?
When has that ever worked? Even if it works in the moment, right? Like my child stomps up the stairs. I'm like, it's really hard not to chase them, but if you go, okay, wait, like, what I'm really wanting, why I am hot and feeling this pressure to chase my husband out the door or whatever, is that if you just for 1 second go, it's because I want connection and I'm having a hard time not having it. And let me take a pause. And do I have to do it right at this second? Do I have to be urgent? And that's like, you're not changing a personality. You're not like, oh, I got to go fix all my anxiety and my hotness. Like, in this one moment, I'm going to tell my nervous system not to panic. And in lots of those small moments, you'll move. Don't wait to like have some epiphany to change your personality. It's these small little moments that we relate more securely that will calm your nervous system down and help people connect. As well as, I was too hot like tonight, and now I need to connect with a friend so they can help me feel fine about it. Help me, not pathologize myself. Because we all have them. There's no perfection. It's just we're working on connection, not perfection.
Yes, I love that. Connection, not perfection. Because we never get there. We're never going to get to a space where
Isn't that the truth?
Always responding perfectly all the time. Okay, so if people want to read your book, they can probably find it everywhere, right? It's probably sold on all the things. And what if they want to dive? What if they want to dive deeper into this work? Do you want to tell us about your program coming up?
Yeah, we have a program coming up that will be online at the beginning of the year, into January, beginning of February. And Sue and I are going to be walking through some of this material and make it come alive, so that sometimes reading something, you have things in your mind, but then you want it to go further and go deeper. So we're going to be doing a program online where we cover the real need to know, not the entire book, just like how do we break it down in a nutshell in the most usable format so you can understand activation and connection and secure relating in a way that makes sense and that's really usable. And you can find that by go to our website at therapistuncensored.com and you look it up and it'll have courses and events and sign up for that. And if for those of your listeners that are therapists, it's not for therapists, it's for everybody. But we will also be giving some CEs for therapists if they listen to it. Because one of our goals in our book is to have a common language that we can all share. And that helps us make sense and depathologizes at the moment. So we love it when therapists are reading it along with somebody they're working with and vice versa.
Perfect.
So,
Thank you so much. And I'll also put a plug in too. Like if you go through the book, there's a lot of graphics where you can read like little tidbits. If you're like, I don't have time to read a whole bunch right now, just go look at those graphics. There's great little explanations that will help. And if you want to dive deeper, you can go and find that course. That sounds amazing. And where can they connect with you to let us know your podcast, Instagram, those things too?
Therapist Uncensored. And you can reach me at ann@therapistuncensored.com. And we also have a great Facebook page that a lot of people are on, and we're on Instagram. I'll give you those connections. That's the least of my talent, but I'll give those to you in your show notes.
We'll have them all in the links in the show notes. If you guys don't know where the show notes are, if you're on Spotify or Apple or whatever, just scroll down a little ways and you will see all those links. So thank you so much for being here today, Ann.
Thank you so much for having me. I loved it. It's a fun conversation.
If you enjoyed this episode as much as I did, I would love for you to help spread the word by getting this message of support and guidance out to as many people as possible. So text it to your best friend or tag me on Instagram and share it. Leave a review, rate it, subscribe it, or follow on your favorite platform. Send me a DM on IG letting me know which parts have impacted you or what you'd like to see on future episodes. We'll see you next week.